Life has a way of leading us down unexpected paths. And sometimes, the most unlikely people are given the chance to change their fate. This is the story of Lisa, a housekeeper at a luxury hotel, whose life takes a dramatic turn when she meets Michael Stone, a successful billionaire businessman. What begins as a mistake in his penthouse suite soon evolves into a life-altering opportunity. One that will challenge everything Lisa thought she knew about herself. Stay tuned to hear more of this inspiring journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to begin today's story. Michael Stone, a man whose presence commanded respect, stepped out of his sleek black car and walked toward the revolving doors of the Crestview Hotel. It was another one of those days, demanding, tiring, and filled with meetings that seemed to blur into one long stretch of time. But, as always, the familiar sight of the hotel lobby greeted him with a sense of comfort. The cool, conditioned air swept over him as the automatic doors opened, signaling his arrival. The lobby was nothing short of magnificent. As it always was, tall ceilings adorned with glittering chandeliers bathed the space in a soft, golden glow. The polished marble floors gleamed under the light, their surfaces reflecting the quiet elegance that permeated the air. It was the kind of luxury that whispered of exclusivity, of wealth carefully crafted and maintained. For Michael, this hotel wasn't just a place to stay, it was a sanctuary. A place where he could escape the pressures of his empire and the whirlwind of business meetings. Michael adjusted the cuffs of his perfectly tailored navy blue suit, feeling the weight of the day lift ever so slightly as he entered the hotel. The faint scent of his expensive cologne lingered in the air around him, further adding to the image of control he had carefully cultivated. At just 35, he had already built an empire. His company, Stone Wines, was a force to be reckoned with, exporting fine wines not only across Europe but across the globe. It had taken years of determination, countless nights of sacrifice, and a relentless pursuit of perfection. Yet, as he entered the hotel, none of that seemed to matter as much as the small comforts of routine. At the reception desk, Claire, the seasoned receptionist, stood at attention. She had been working here long enough to know Michael's routine by heart. But she never let her professionalism slip. Her posture straightened, and a warm but restrained smile spread across her face as Michael approached. "Good evening, Mr. Stone. Welcome back to the Crestview. We've been expecting you," she said, her voice smooth, almost melodic in its familiarity. Michael nodded, his sharp eyes scanning the lobby. His mind was already drifting to the evening ahead, a business dinner with potential investors from France. The deal could be a game-changer for Stone Wines, expanding the brand into a new market that had always felt just out of reach. But that was later. For now, the lobby's quiet luxury provided him with a brief moment to breathe. "Evening, Claire. My usual, please, penthouse suite 709. Michael replied, pulling his phone from his pocket and glancing at it briefly. "Of course, sir. We've ensured your minibar is stocked with your preferred wine selection," Claire said, a professional touch in her tone as she handed him the keycard. "Excellent. I trust my luggage has already been sent up?" Michael asked as he slid the keycard into his pocket, his gaze still distant as his mind ran over the details of the upcoming dinner. "Yes, sir. Your assistant had it delivered earlier," Claire responded, and as Michael nodded in acknowledgement, she added, "Would you like a dinner reservation for tonight?" Michael checked his Rolex, noting the time. 7:15 p.m. He had exactly 45 minutes before the dinner. And being late was never an option for him. "Not tonight," he replied. "I'll be out for a meeting. Just make sure my suite remains undisturbed until I return." Claire gave a respectful nod. And with that, Michael turned and walked toward the elevator. The night was far from over, and the world of high-stakes business would soon demand his full attention. Yet, as he stepped into the elevator, he couldn't help but notice the quiet beauty of the hotel, a beauty that had become familiar over the years but never lost its charm. As the elevator doors closed, Michael leaned back against the wall, allowing himself a moment of respite. He thought about the deal he was about to close, a deal that could cement his legacy in the wine industry. But, as his thoughts raced, he was unaware that fate was already weaving its own plan for the night. Just as the elevator doors were closing, a young woman in a neatly pressed housekeeping uniform rushed past. She was carrying a basket of fresh linens. Her steps hurried, her face flushed with the nervous energy of a newcomer. Michael barely spared her a glance as she dashed toward the elevators. But there was something about her, a certain air of determination, of ambition, that caught his eye. Even if just for a second. Lisa, the newest housekeeper at the Crestview, barely noticed the tall, commanding man in front of her. She had just started her first week and was determined to prove herself. She muttered quietly to herself as she neared the elevators. Just one more floor, and I can finally rest. Her exhaustion was palpable. A long day of cleaning rooms and tending to the needs of demanding guests had worn her thin. But she pushed through, her mind focused on finishing her shift. It wasn't that she didn't enjoy the work, it was just that the hotel, with its luxurious decor and expensive clientele, sometimes felt like a world she didn't belong to. She longed for the day when she could be more than just a housekeeper. Little did Lisa know, her life was about to change in ways she could never have anticipated. Lisa's exhaustion was palpable as she pushed her housekeeping cart down the carpeted hallway of the 7th floor. The day had been long, too long. A dozen rooms cleaned, polished, dusted, and made ready for guests. She had smiled and nodded her way through countless polite interactions with the guests. But behind the friendly facade, the exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. Every muscle ached, and her eyelids threatened to close with every step. Yet, there was no time to rest. Not now, not yet. The last task of the night awaited her, a visit to the penthouse suite. She had worked at the Crestview for nearly a week now, but she had yet to familiarize herself with every nook and cranny of the hotel. However, the penthouse? It stood as a symbol of everything she longed for, the luxury, the power, the life she felt she could never have. She had heard the other housekeepers speak of it in hushed tones. The way the guests in the penthouse were always treated with the utmost care and respect. And there was one guest in particular, Michael Stone, the billionaire who owned one of the most successful wine empires in Europe. The man whose name had become synonymous with power, wealth, and perfection. Lisa could only imagine what it must be like to live in that world. As she approached the door to Suite 709, her hands trembled slightly. She had cleaned many rooms before, but this one felt different. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the whispers about Mr. Stone. The way his name always seemed to come up whenever the other housekeepers spoke about him. Maybe it was just the sheer grandeur of the suite, its towering windows, the velvet curtains, the luxurious furniture that seemed to exist only in the most expensive hotels in the world. Lisa didn't have time to dwell on her thoughts. She pulled out her master key, inserted it into the slot, and turned the knob. The door clicked open. The suite was exactly as she had imagined it, elegant, opulent, a perfect reflection of the man who occupied it. High ceilings with golden accents, polished wood furniture that gleamed under the soft lighting, and the faint, intoxicating scent of fresh roses and imported cologne. It was a room that demanded respect. A room that seemed to breathe luxury with every breath. She sighed quietly and began her work. She fluffed the pillows, replaced the towels, dusted the marble countertops, and made sure every corner of the room gleamed with perfection. Her mind, however, began to wander. The weariness in her body became overwhelming. And for a moment, she let herself sit at the edge of the bed. Just for a second, just long enough to breathe, to close her eyes, to stop for a brief moment before the weight of the world pulled her back into the never-ending cycle of cleaning and service. But 1 minute turned into 2, then 5. Before she knew it, the softness of the bed beneath her had lulled her into a deep, peaceful sleep. The exhaustion that had been building for hours was finally catching up to her. And she surrendered to it without hesitation. She didn't hear the door creak open. She didn't feel the presence of another person enter the room. She didn't notice the man who had just returned from a long, successful business meeting. It wasn't until Michael Stone stepped into the room that Lisa stirred. Her peaceful slumber abruptly interrupted by the sound of the door clicking open. Her eyes fluttered open, but for a moment, they struggled to focus. The room was dimly lit. the soft glow from the bedside lamp casting golden streaks of light across the luxurious space. And then, it hit her. The shock, the panic, the realization. She was in his bed. She had fallen asleep in the bed of Michael Stone. The very man whose name had haunted her thoughts since the moment she stepped into this hotel. Her heart slammed against her chest as her eyes locked onto his tall, imposing figure standing just beside the bed. He looked down at her with an expression that was difficult to read. His dark eyes assessing the situation with a calm that only someone like him could possess. "Who are you?" His voice cut through the stillness of the room. Deep and authoritative. Lisa's mind raced. She could barely form a coherent thought, let alone an explanation. She had never been in this kind of situation before. Her words tumbled over each other in desperation as she scrambled to sit up, her hands shaking. I didn't mean to," she stammered. "I was just cleaning. And I sat down for a second. And I must have. I didn't realize." She could feel her cheeks flush with embarrassment as she stood, hastily smoothing out her uniform. She grabbed her housekeeping cart, her fingers trembling with anxiety. She needed to get out of there. She needed to escape before he fired her, before he told the manager and ruined everything she had worked for. But Michael didn't let her leave. His calm, yet firm voice stopped her in her tracks. "Hold it." Lisa's breath caught in her throat as she froze, her back stiffening. Slowly, she turned around, unable to hide the panic in her eyes. Her mind raced, but she couldn't think of anything to say. The room was filled with tension, the air thick with uncertainty. Michael studied her for a moment, his gaze softening just slightly. "What's your name?" he asked. His tone still measured, but there was something different now, something akin to curiosity. Lisa hesitated, unsure of what to say. But the question hung in the air, and she could do nothing but answer. "Lisa," she whispered. He studied her a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then, with a sigh, he stepped back. "Fine, go," he said, his voice now calm. Without another word, Lisa grabbed her cart and rushed out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. As the door clicked shut behind her, she pressed her hand to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. She had never felt so shaken, so unsure of herself. But as she hurried down the hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something told her that Michael Stone was not a man who would forget. And something told her that she wasn't going to be able to avoid him for much longer. The days that followed felt like an endless loop for Lisa. She continued to push her cart down the long hallways of the Crestview, cleaning rooms, replacing towels, and smoothing out beds, all while trying to avoid the memory of that fateful night. Every time she stepped onto the 7th floor, her heart would race a little faster. Her palms would sweat just a bit more. The weight of what had happened in Michael Stone's penthouse seemed to follow her like a shadow, lingering at the edge of her thoughts. But she couldn't run from it forever. Every day, she could feel the pull of the unknown, an invisible thread that kept tugging her toward the idea of something more. Something beyond the confines of her hotel uniform, beyond the repetitive routine that had marked her life for so long. She had spent so many years blending into the background, cleaning the rooms of people far wealthier and more powerful than her, yet never feeling truly seen. She had longed for a life of significance, but it always seemed out of reach. Until now. It had been a week since that night in the penthouse. And though Lisa tried to push the thought of Michael Stone to the back of her mind, she couldn't escape the nagging feeling that he had seen something in her. That brief moment when he had asked her name, when he had studied her with curiosity rather than irritation, it had made her wonder, did he see something in her that she couldn't even see in herself? The thought gnawed at her. The way he had stood there, so calm, so composed, while she had been a bundle of nerves and confusion. He hadn't yelled at her. He hadn't called for the manager to have her fired. Instead, he had simply let her go, without further consequence. It had been strange, but also strangely comforting. There was something about Michael Stone that demanded attention, not just from others, but from her too. And that was why she kept finding herself at the hotel's reception desk, waiting for the inevitable. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman named Samantha, smiled knowingly when Lisa approached. "You're being asked for again, Lisa, suite 709. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know whether to feel anxious or curious. It had been days since she had seen him, and the thought of stepping into his suite again both thrilled and terrified her. But she knew she had no choice. She had to face this, whatever it was. With trembling hands, she adjusted her uniform and set off for the penthouse once more. This time, as she reached suite 709, the butterflies in her stomach were almost unbearable. She couldn't help but wonder what Michael Stone wanted this time. Her mind raced with possibilities. He had already given her a chance. Hadn't he? Maybe he had decided to let her make a mistake again. Maybe he was testing her. Or maybe there was something deeper at play. As she knocked softly on the door, she took a deep breath, her pulse quickening. When the door opened, there he stood again, Michael. His sharp eyes met hers. And for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. "Come in," he said finally, his voice low, almost casual. It was a voice that suggested a sense of authority, but also something else, something that Lisa couldn't quite put her finger on. She stepped into the room, and immediately the familiar luxury enveloped her. The velvet curtains, the polished furniture, the expensive cologne that lingered in the air, everything about the suite screamed wealth. But none of it felt as overwhelming as it had the first time. Instead, it felt like something she was beginning to accept. "I have a request," Michael said, his gaze never leaving hers. Lisa braced herself. She had no idea what this request would be, but she was prepared for anything. "I need a new personal assistant," he continued, his words straightforward. "Someone who can handle the small things, but also the big things. Someone who isn't afraid to take on responsibility." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she didn't understand. Was this some kind of joke? He was offering her, someone who had spent years cleaning rooms, an office job. She started, her voice trailing off. "But I'm just a housekeeper." Michael smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed to suggest he knew exactly what she was thinking. "I see something in you, Lisa. You're smart, hardworking. You've been underestimated your whole life, haven't you?" Lisa nodded slowly, unable to speak. Her chest tightened as the reality of his words sank in. Could this really be happening? Was he offering her a chance to leave behind the life she knew? To step into something completely unknown? He leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I'm offering you the chance to work with me. To work in my company. I'll train you. You won't be cleaning rooms anymore, Lisa. You'll be sitting at a desk, making decisions. You'll be in control of your own future." Lisa could hardly believe what she was hearing. For so long, she had wondered if she would ever escape the life she had been born into. The life of cleaning after others, of being invisible. But here it was, an opportunity, as real as the room they were standing in. For the first time in her life, Lisa felt like she was being seen. Not just as a housekeeper. Not just as a worker who cleaned up after others. But as someone with potential. Someone who could step out of the shadows and into the light. Michael Stone had seen something in her. And for the first time, she saw it in herself too. As weeks passed, Lisa's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. The woman who had once scrubbed floors and made beds was now sitting at a desk, managing projects, making decisions, and learning the ins and outs of the wine industry. Michael had kept his promise. He trained her, guiding her through the complexities of the business. And in return, Lisa proved herself to be more than capable. But it wasn't just the work that changed her. It was Michael's unwavering belief in her. He had seen something in her when no one else had. He had given her the opportunity to be more than what she had always thought she could be. And through it all, Lisa had learned to believe in herself, to trust in her potential, and to take control of her own future. As she stood beside him, now his confidant and partner, she realized that life had a funny way of surprising you. The path she had once thought was destined for her was not the only path. There was always another door, another opportunity, waiting to be opened. Now, as she gazed out at the city below, she was no longer just the girl who had cleaned rooms at a luxury hotel. She was a woman with purpose, with dreams of her own, and a future that was limitless. If you want to hear more life stories that inspire and change perspectives, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for new videos. Life is full of surprises. And the best stories are yet to come. Thank you for watching.